What is going on, everybody? Welcome to Into the Stands, episode 19. It's been a while. Hope everyone had a great spring break. I sure did until about 5 or so on St. Patrick's Day, 5 p.m. Yeah, it wasn't a great. It hasn't been a great. That was not a great day for Iona basketball. Um, uh, I'm not sure if any of you guys know, but yeah, we all went to the game actually up in Albany.
That
Went all the
was,
way up to Albany.
I'll say this firsthand. We'll dive into the game in a minute, but that was probably one of the best experiences I've ever had at a sporting event. I've been to a couple. I've been to the PGA Championship. I've been to the ACC tournament when I was in Brooklyn a couple of years ago. That topped it all off. It sucked that I was all UConn fans for the majority. Oh, yeah. Dude, I was scared to death because I was surrounded my entire. I didn't sit with these guys, unfortunately. I really should have. Would have saved me a ton of money. And I went out. I got to my seat, and I was surrounded by UConn fans. It was. I've never had that before.
I do want to add, Robbie, because I've been to, an NBA game before. I've seen a Knicks game, but it just feels like, I don't know, just that atmosphere. I think it being kind of closed in, I feel like it was just really fun to be there. But fortunately, it did not go the way we want. But in order to start, I think we need to kind of delve into starting off in the MAC tournament.
So, yeah, we'll start off with the MAC. Now, I don't know about any of you here. That was probably the most interesting conference tournament I've ever seen. Because due to the fact that seeds 2, 3, and 4 all lost within a span of 12 hours of each, like 12 to 24 hours of each other. I've never seen that before. 10 and 11 played each other in the semifinals. That is when you know that our conference is terrible. When 10 and 11 is one semifinal, which was St. Peter's and Marist, which, by the way, was a great game. I'll give them that. It was a great game. I was able to watch it in my suite mate's room. But we look at Iona and Niagara, and that game was scary for a little bit. We were not playing very well to a team that we should have been beating by around 20 points. But we got the job done. Walter Clayton Jr., we actually have to go into him in a minute. But it's been a very interesting time period for Iona. We had the MAC tournament. And then we go into the final. I'll get these guys takes in a minute on it. That final was also really interesting. Mm-hmm. Marist, with nothing to lose, is the big dogs versus the basement. And early on, you got really nervous of how good Marist was defending Danis Jenkins and Walter Clayton Jr. And then both of them decided to emerge as why our team is so good at basketball, as Rick Pitino and the boys went out and won the MAC again, and then got eliminated in the first round of the NCAA tournament. We'll go into you guys first. Who do you think was the X factor for the team, not just in the MAC tournament, the NCAA tournament, but the whole year? Who was that X factor player? Who would you give like the MVP of the team to this year? We'll start with Colin.
Well, I think the obvious choice, because he basically got it for the MAC League, was Walter Clayton. And, I think just coming in as a sophomore, being able to improve his game, averaging about 16, 17 points a game. But, going back to that championship game against Marist, now we kind of forget that was a very close ball game with about 5 to 6 minutes left. Marist, you got to give them credit. I think it was before the MAC tournament, only 7 wins on the entire year, the worst team in the league, but they fought hard. I think Patrick Gardner was a huge contributor from that center. He was pretty good.
17 a game as well.
Yeah, he had 23 in that championship, but ultimately being able to pull away, that's what Iona should do. It's what they did. We saw on Selection Sunday that they ended up playing UConn and Albany, a game that the Northeast would should be sure to love, as both teams are relatively close to that area. As Robbie said, we went to MVP Arena. And it was a very fun watch in the first half. And, I think that Iona came out, they were determined, ready to go. We saw that they were kind of matching the UConn intensity. We saw they were hitting big shots. But kind of the shift happened almost immediately when that second half started. You remember that Iona fouled. There was a 4-point play, and UConn just kind of took off from there. But the main concern with UConn was going into that game was their big men. They felt that they had more dominant big men that would kind of overpower Iona. And you saw, Nelly Jr., Joseph, Osborne, Shima, that kind of struggled a bit there in that second half dealing with them. I mean, Sonogo on UConn, 28 points. I believe he outscored Iona in the entire second half by himself. I think he's about like 2. But he had like 18 rebounds. Absolute dominant performance. But, I I think that Iona got unlucky here because say if we had Virginia, you saw what happened to Virginia against Furman. I mean, we can go into that a little bit more when we talk about the bracket, but I mean, if we got maybe an easier draw like that, it could be a whole different story. But I mean, you have to give them credit. I think that UConn was the hardest 4 seed you could have played.
They underseeded for sure.
Yeah, if they're the hardest 4 seed you could have played, and they still gave him a good fight in the first half. Rick Pitino was saying at halftime, really proud of the Gales. I mean, I just wish that we could have got a different draw, but I mean, I get why the NCAA would schedule that. Obviously, Iona and UConn bringing a lot of hype in that matchup in the Northeast. But yeah, that's the end of the season for the Gales. Chris, what do you think about what you saw from that game?
Well, first of all, to answer your question, Robbie, just to have a different answer from Colin, I'm going to say Danis Jenkins. Because, listen,
I love this pick.
Listen, he's a guy who it seemed like almost every day was dropping maybe like 20, close to 20 points, right?
Yeah.
And he stepped up big in that championship game, the MAC championship game.
He had like 20,
right.
high 20s.
Right.
He went off in that second half. He was that X factor in the second half.
Then comes the game against UConn, and he didn't do all that much.
I think he had like 12, maybe.
Right. And what you see is when he was on, right, this team was, winning easily, or not easily, but finding ways,
firing on all cylinders,
and they started off that first half with Barrick John Louise was making.
He was hitting everything. Bro,
he started off at 8 points.
I think he had 8 points the first 3 minutes, then he got subbed out, unfortunately, and then I think we went on like a cold streak for a couple minutes.
Right.
UConn got back.
I remember it was
that first half. It was just all raining threes.
Robbie, I do want to comment real quick that Iona was kind of receiving some hype leading into this. Barack Obama picked them to go to the Sweet 16. I saw some of the guys on Barstool picked them to go to the Sweet 16.
Picked them to go to the
yeah, and even Des Bryant was out there tweeting about how Iona's not scared. But they were really generating a lot of hype. I saw people even saying, I remember looking at Twitter at halftime of the game. People are saying that this is by far the most entertaining game in the tournament. It's just really a testament to how Iona kind of stood up to them. We kind of expected it to not go that way, but it fell apart there in the second half.
Right. I think what made that environment so awesome is it's not to say that these other sports are like you go to an NBA game. It's not to say that the NBA atmosphere at a live game is whack in any way. It's just that what we saw go into that game is not something you see very often. I didn't go to the games in Atlantic City, but it seemed like on one half of the stadium you had a few Iona fans, and on the other side a few like Marist fans.
It looked so empty. I agree.
Right, but what we saw going up to Albany, and that's why going up to Albany, like I was excited for it. It was cool, but I was kind of like, hey, this is probably going to be a mediocre experience. But what it was is you could tell it was such a big event for the people up there that there's not much else going on there. So these people, either fans in school, making the trek up there to watch their team, or just fans in the area trying to enjoy.
I remember the round was hosted by Siena. And I believe when I was going I bought a shirt. For reference, I bought like a long sleeve shirt. You'll probably see in the next episode, to be honest with you. And I went out and I saw like 10 Siena fans were online behind me to get a shirt. I'm like, why the heck are you guys here? They're like, just for the love of the game. I love that. It really brought those. Like, because Albany had like 8 inches of snow a couple days before.
Yeah.
And when I think I noticed it more because I drove up a different way, I think, than you guys did. It was really like when you went from, I think it was like Westchester, and then you started going north of Westchester. Like there was like went from no snow to like 8 inches, like instantly.
Yeah.
It was so much different up there.
I think the other thing is that's not an environment you see very often in sports. Like, okay, you go to an NBA away playoff game. Let's say the Knicks are playing the Celtics up in Boston. You go up to Boston as a Knicks fan. Sure, there might be like a couple other Knicks fans, but for the most part, it's going to be Celtics fans. Say that game's an environment, a winner-take-all game. The environment's still going to be all Celtics games. The stakes were so high. I think college basketball in general, I'm not saying it's better than NBA basketball, but the stakes are higher, right? Because these guys are playing for their careers. Fans are playing for their schools. Their real passion. A real passion that they have.
Well, I think that's the reason why a lot of people prefer it, because a lot of people do like kind of the stakes in that aspect. And, the NBA, people don't really like how, we saw for years the Warriors and the Cavs, how that was predictable. That was always going to go that way, because if you have a best of 7 series format, no matter what, you're most likely always going to get the best teams. But what March Madness does, you can see a team like a Princeton, you can see them go to the Sweet 16. You can see Fairleigh Dickinson, which is a school we're going to be talking a lot about in a couple minutes. But, yeah, I think that for sure that college basketball is very fun. I know a lot of people do love college football, including Robbie, but personally, I think I prefer college basketball for that reason.
I agree with that.
Yeah, but, overall, I am a big fan of college basketball even more now after this season.
I want to make this comment now. I think it's right that we talk about what's going on post-tournament next. And I'll start with this because I've followed the whole thing all week. I was unfortunately not able to go to the press conference at Tobin Anderson, but you got to ask, gentlemen, why is Tobin Anderson even being talked about here? The former Fairleigh Dickinson coach, why the hell is he even being talked about? Well, unfortunately, Rick Pitino is predictably gone. He's gone to St. John's and probably taking a couple of Gales with him. We saw multiple players, Cruz Davis, Walter Clayton Jr., Nelly Jr. Joseph, Quinn Slazinski, all enter the transfer portal on Monday and late Sunday. It's going to be a big transition. You heard Tobin Anderson's excited for what's to come. Iona landed a transfer yesterday, a 6'11" forward from Texas Tech, who's had a little bit of injury situation, but he's pretty decent. He'll fit right into what Tobin Anderson wants to do. But the writing was on the wall for when Pitino was going to leave, when St. John's was like, yeah, go make a move for this guy. You wanted the veteran experience. You tried it with Mullins and Mike Anderson. Honestly, I thought we were going to hire Mike Anderson, but just because of the name and all that. But I think Iona made a quick move. They wanted to make it brief, and they hired Tobin Anderson, who I thought was out of the possible candidates. I thought he was number 1 or number 2 on my list. Kamani Young from UConn was my other one, for assistant coach from UConn, who was known for developing backcourt players. I thought he would have been a very interesting fit here as well, being a guy from Queens. But at the end of the day, Tobin Anderson's going to be the new head coach. And going down to the players, the biggest person leaving is Walter Clayton Jr., unfortunately. Colin, I think we've all been able to talk to Walt. We've been with Walt before. Y'all had class with him, if you remember, all the way back in the fall. But it's going to suck to see him go. He was a big part of our team. Rumored schools right now, Colin actually was talking to me about this a couple minutes ago, was it St. John's or Florida? Is that right? St. John's or Florida. My prediction for that, as much as I want to say St. John's, he is from Florida, and he'd be about 15 minutes away from his hometown. So it'd be very interesting to see if Walter Clayton Jr. does go that way. So Nelly Jr. Joseph get interest from some big schools as well. Quinn Slazinski is likely, according to sources, heading to St. John's. Cruz Davis is unfortunate, our former 4-star. We all knew that was going to happen too. He'll probably be heading to St. John's as well. But it's going to be interesting to see what Tobin Anderson does on the transfer market, like to see what players he can find to join Iona. I have a feeling, because Rick did say that St. John's is going to overhaul a little bit. I wonder who leaves from them. Now, it would be interesting. I want to see what guards leave from them, because I think we can get a St. John's guard if we really needed it. Like, I'm a big fan personally. Posh Alexander, he does fit Rick Pitino's scheme a little bit. I wouldn't be surprised if Walter Clayton replaces him, if he does go to St. John's. It's just gonna be a very interesting transition period, but I think Iona got probably one of the better head coaches available. I mean, Ed Cooley was available. We weren't getting him. He went to Georgetown, and I think not even a day after he was rumored to go, to be possibly going to them. But it sucks to see Pitino go. I mean, we were the school that gave him a second chance in college basketball. I mean, you saw the scandal back years ago. He went to Greece, had a great success over there, and I'm glad we were able to give him that chance. And I think we were all glad, as students here and people following the team. I think it was a great privilege to watch Pitino coach the squad, and the squad we were able to watch. But at the end of the day, I think it's going to be a good future with Tobin Anderson. And I'm excited to see where this team goes from here. But don't be surprised if Iona makes some big moves coming up soon with transfers, or maybe even recruiting. Maybe some recruits come with Tobin Anderson. Who knows?
Well, I mean, I think it's also important to note. I don't know if you mentioned this, Robbie, but there's another reason why Tobin Anderson is pretty popular right now, and that's because he had that huge win against Purdue the other day.
16-1, maybe.
Unbelievable. And you want something to be excited for, apart from who Iona could possibly bring in. The idea of the stat of Tobin Anderson winning one more March Madness game than Rick Pitino the past couple of years is
last 6 years.
Definitely something to hang your hope on. But yeah, I think really what you thought, and really just to rehash what you said, right? It's just a day that was supposed to be kind of a bittersweet day. I mean, I don't think many people expected us to beat UConn, right? I think the favorite was UConn. I was saying I want a close game. I think if we would have
won for
the first half, right? But I was saying, right, the entire game, entire game. I wanted a close game, or I would have rather us just get blown the hell out, and it's just all right. We were
At
here.
least you guys would have only wasted
Right.
$20, and I would have wasted I think 10 times that maybe.
But regardless, because I mean, we
Good
could
business
still
decision,
still
Robbie.
be saying that because we lost either way. What happened was we had our hope by this first half. We were something to be excited for, and then obviously just completely fell apart. And it seemed like everything else just fell apart after that as well. Rick Pitino leaving, and then of course we can't really talk about it officially, but yeah, the possibility of some of our guys leaving, which it's most likely going to happen. But
I want to go back and talk about Pitino for a little bit because I remember I was watching his post-game press conference after the UConn game, and it kind of goes back to what he said before. You can kind of see the writing on the wall because Pitino has always said how he hates being in a one-bid league. And I understand that because realistically, look at the Iona team last year. That team should have been in the tournament. That should not have been St. Peter's. They were the best team in the MAC all year, but they ended up losing one game to Ryder. And many would say that, yeah, that maybe that's the reason why you shouldn't get in, but that's just the way the MAC set up. Pitino never liked that. Pitino's used to obviously being in bigger conferences, winning national championships, going to the Final Four. He knew that Iona had limitations at the moment being in the MAC. And he also said, too, in this press conference, when addressing kind of UConn and how they won that game, he was saying how we didn't really have the bodies to put up with them. We didn't really, he also said how he didn't really feel like we had the same bench production that UConn had. And that's just, kind of the limitations that went with Iona. And you think that you kind of saw that he knew what it was. He knew that Iona was just a way that he can go there for a couple of years, get back into coach and kind of rehabilitate his image. And now he's over there in St. John's because, having a Hall of Fame head coach like that play for a school like Iona is pretty extraordinary. And I think it was very fun to watch. We only got to really see it for a year, but definitely something I'll always remember seeing a guy like that coach for Iona. But, I think that wish him the best in St. John's. I think that he definitely has a chance to turn them around, go to Providence because, a lot of the old college basketball head coaches that you think of from that generation have retired. Coach Gay's gone. Jim Boeheim just retired. Roy Williams retired. Pitino is really one of the last ones left. And, I think that getting one more shot, he says he wants to coach till he's like 75, 76. I think he could definitely do it. He's still, being able to lead Iona to March Madness. So, see what happens there at St. John's. Moving on to Tobin Anderson. I do like this hire. I'm excited to see it because Tobin Anderson was a guy who, I'll be honest with you, I really did not know much about a week ago. He really kind of just got into the spotlight just really off this Fairleigh Dickinson win. But what people were saying just immediately, I see he's already a beloved media personality. People were saying how they love, his passion for the game, the way he, amps up his players. I remember he had at his interview after they lost about going fishing. That was a very popular clip. But he seems like a guy who the players seem to love. They seem to play hard for because you look at Fairleigh Dickinson. They were the smallest team in college basketball. I remember I saw a picture of their gym too. Their facilities aren't great either. They should not have even been in the tournament in the first place. They lost their conference tournament to Merrimack, but it's just because Merrimack transitioned to a D1 school that they didn't go to that tournament. But yet he still got those guys to play so hard against Purdue, which for most of the season was ranked one of the top teams in the country. They were a number one seed. So being able to pull off one of the most miraculous upsets ever, that's immediately a guy who you think of, and being a finalist in 2020 as well. Definitely, I think a good hire. Excited to see what he does. Hopefully he can retain a lot of the guys, that recruit you mentioned we got from Texas Tech. That's sure to be good. Rooting for Tobin Anderson every step of the way and really excited to see what he has in store for the Gales. And also, though, I think now we have to talk about some more games that happen in March Madness, overall take on the bracket. Now, I'm going to start off with the Princeton Tigers, obviously, because just seeing an Ivy League school go to the Sweet 16, could they be the next St. Peter's? I think it might be even more impressive considering you never really see Ivy League schools at this point. But
for context, for those that didn't know, Iona beat this team already. Granted, it was by 2, but we still beat them. That's absolutely crazy. That on 15 seed, that Iona beat St. Peter's. We beat St. Peter's twice in the regular season. We're 3-0 against 15 seeds that have gone deep in the tournament recently. That's absolutely beyond belief for me. But what was one team that, you're talking about Princeton. Let's see what do you have on them?
Well, they're not, obviously they don't have they're not as talented as the other teams. So one thing that they really did is they were pretty good, crashing the glass, getting rebounds against Arizona and against Missouri. I believe was the second team they played. So, I'm really excited to see what they have going forward. It's always fun. I'm sure most of the country's behind them right now, rooting for them to keep on advancing. Maybe they can be like St. Peter's. We still have to wait and see what happens. But, I think that it's cool for college basketball. Whenever you see these underdogs come in, hopefully Princeton can keep it going. Looking around the bracket, I remember, my Final Four prediction went pretty bad because I had Purdue going to the national championship, and that did not work out.
Are all of ours out?
Well, my national champion was going to
I had Marquette. So.
My champion.
go pick Marquette.
My
What is
champion
this?
was Gonzaga, so they're still in it. So we'll see what
Okay.
happens there.
That's fair.
Yeah, but also we have Creighton going to the Sweet 16. They're a
Yes.
team who I actually picked to go to the Final Four. I really like that team and how
I
they've
was
been going.
to, but I love that Creighton team and what they've been able to do as well.
You know, Michigan State in there too as a 7 seed. Tom Izzo leading those guys. We have actually the game tonight between UCLA and Gonzaga, right? That's going to be a great game. Rematch of that Final Four matchup from just 2 years ago. Jalen Suggs hitting that half-court game winner. I mean, man, those two teams are starting to get a pretty good rivalry going on there. But yeah, you know, a lot of upsets, a lot of 2 seeds going out, a lot of 1 seeds getting eliminated. And also, we mentioned it before, that Furman Virginia game, what happened there? Pretty awful pass, which led to Furman ended up winning that game.
Colin,
I was watching that game. I was doing a recording, mock call recording to send to just to have it online. And I was doing that game. I'm like off away from the mic. I'm like, what did I just watch? They had a timeout. We've seen that in sports before where teams do something kind of stupid with having time, and they have a timeout still. New York Jets. But, you know, at the end of the day, I'm going to say a Sweet 16 game to watch tonight. I'll save one tomorrow. My one for tonight, and if we had the chat, they would be going crazy about it. I'm going to go with K-State and Michigan State as my game to watch tonight. 2 teams that are going to be physical. I love what Tom Izzo has done this season with Michigan State. They were a 7 seed. They went out and beat both me and Chris's national champion Marquette. They really limited what they were able to do. Though I do have like a game of the tournament to watch out for that I'm picking right now. There's a lot of options. My game of the tournament is going to be Furman and Virginia, as like how crazy it was. I mean, you could say there's multiple options you can pick for this. You can say a game like Fairleigh Dickinson Purdue. You can say UConn Iona's first half. You could say countless others. Kennesaw State Xavier. We were in the arena at MVP Arena watching the end of that.
I want to talk about.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Being there in the MVP Arena. I mean, just, you know, when you're at home, you do always switch back and forth between multiple March Madness games, but that atmosphere, just them showing the other games on the TV and the fans going crazy as it happened. I remember everyone was kind of rooting for Kennesaw there when they're showing it on the Jumbotron. But yeah, you know, once again, like I said, phenomenal atmosphere, really fun to do, and hopefully we can do it again sometime.
Though the game to watch for me on Friday, I think I got to go with the first Mountain West team to win a March Madness game in a good amount of time. I'm going with San Diego State and Alabama. San Diego State, a very deep team. They play 12 guys. No one scores more than 12 a game for them. It's absolutely bonkers what they're able to do, how deep their team is. And then you got Alabama, a 1 seed. They've had situations off the court with that team, Brandon Miller especially. But I think Alabama should win this game. But it's so unpredictable. That's why everyone watches this tournament. Every game, everyone does bracket challenges across the country, and it's so unpredictable. And then the other one, of course, Gonzaga, UCLA, the game to watch tonight. So my 3 games to watch: Michigan State, Kansas State, UCLA, Gonzaga, and Bama and San Diego State. Chris, which other game?
You stole mine. I was gonna also talk about Michigan State versus.
I didn't think you were gonna pick that. That's why I went with it.
Right. I mean, you know, of course, Michigan State beating my Marquette that I thought were gonna. Actually, you know, of course, I picked Iona to win the whole thing and lose to Marquette in the final, but obviously just joking around.
Iona biased brackets, yes?
Yes, I had Iona win the national championship in one bracket.
For all you guys. How many brackets did you make this year?
I made 2. I made one with Iona as a national champion and one as Gonzaga.
Wow. Oh, I want to say how many I had.
So on paper and on other apps, I think I did a total of 13 this year, which is double what I did last year. And I picked like half of them had Marquette winning it all, which was kind of stupid. But one of them did have Kansas State winning. So, I mean, how many national champions do I have? I know I had Gonzaga winning one. I think I had Houston winning one and K-State. So 13 brackets, and I barely have any national champions left, which is kind of sad.
Yeah, but yeah, I don't know if Colin talked about this one, but Princeton Creighton,
the battle of the Blue Bloods.
Yeah, exactly, and I mean, yeah, that's going to be a good one. Yeah, Princeton getting here is crazy, an Ivy League school.
You saw videos of the campus going crazy,
right? And then Creighton being here, that's a very good team. They obviously, Colin, as you said, you were predicting them to go to the Final Four. I mean, I think that's honestly, even though maybe they're not the 2 biggest names right in the Sweet 16. I think they're going to be the most fun, and I think that might be the most fun one to look forward to because it's it's obviously one that's expected to be there, and then one Cinderella story. I'm going with that one.
Yeah, I think that pretty much wraps up for what we want to talk about March Madness because the NFL has had a lot of
Actually, I
news that
wanna
we haven't
do one
gone
more
into. Okay, Robbie, you go ahead.
Now, I had one brief thing, and I want to know, who do you think out of all the teams left, who would you pick to be your national champion out of the 16 teams left? I'll start.
Tough.
I should have asked you guys, told you about this before. I'm going to say mine very quickly. I'm going with Alabama. I love what they've been able to do all season. SEC tournament, they look great. First 2 games look pretty convincing for Bama. Granted, they beat Maryland by 23, and then they went out and in the first round on Thursday, went out and they struggled against Texas A&M Corpus Christi, which I did not expect, but they went out one by 21, so I'm going to go with Bama. Colin, who's your pick?
Well, I'm sticking with my original national champion. I'm staying with the Zags. Now, they had, 2 close contests against Grand Canyon and TCU, but they're a battle-tested team. They're a proven team. Drew, Timmy, and the boys, I think they get it done. So I'm going to still roll with the Zags in the national championship.
Right, and for me, I'm between Gonzaga and then I guess my kind of surprise one to go all the way. Not really, I'm not sure, but kind of in the middle. Michigan State. I think they've looked pretty good their past 2 games. Of course, being Marquette the last game. I know they have a tough game against Kansas State today, but I think between those 2, I would pick to win.
But yeah, like I said, I think we should move on to NFL free agency now. Now, obviously, I still want to talk about the Giants, but the Jets have been the center of the NFL world recently. Robbie, Aaron Rodgers, he says he wants to play for the Jets. There's been a lot of moves. Alan Lazard coming over. But yes, on the Pat McAfee show, Aaron Rodgers did say, quote, he intends to play for the New York Jets. As our local Jets fan here, what is your reaction?
I was able to watch it live, and I was not shocked. I don't think many people were when they heard this reaction, though. The way he put it on the show was really made it seem that it was going to be he was not going to that darkness retreat, which took longer than I think people originally expected. It was 90% retired. That's crazy to me. That we could have said goodbyes to Aaron Rodgers, who we've both been, all 3 of us have been able to watch for a very long time. Well, intending to play for the Jets, I don't think the Jets are going to make this easy on Green Bay. I think Green Bay is not going to make it easy for the Jets. So I think it's going to come down to, the Jets don't want to give up a first-round pick, and fair enough, because they didn't do it for Tyreek Hill, and you could argue that Tyreek Hill's trade value is similar to Aaron Rodgers, I think. You can make a comparison regarding that, even though the quarterback and wide receivers, 2 completely different positions. I still feel like their stock or value should be kind of similar. So, well, speaking on that note, I think this would be a very interesting move. It raises a lot of questions about who you do trade as a player. Player to watch me to get traded. I love the guy, but he gets injured too much. I'm going to go Corey Davis. Watch out for him to either get cut or traded in the next few weeks. If they make this deal, he has to be gone. Because the Jets they signed Alan Lazard. They signed McCole Hardman yesterday. They're rumored in possible moves for Odell Beckham. They did trade Elijah Moore, which was also kind of sad. We did get a 2nd-round pick. Sorry about that. Well, we did have to give up a 3rd, which is unfortunate. But at the end of the day, I do like the value we got, and maybe we trade that pick for Rodgers. Who the heck knows? But at the same time, look out for the Jets. I don't think the Jets are done in free agency. I don't think they should be done. I think they need to address cornerback a little bit still. I think depth at corner, linebacker. They got Chuck Clark. I still think a better safety could be needed. You could argue there could be a better defensive tackle alongside Quinnen Williams. So I think there's still a couple holes that the Jets need to fill on their squad. But I feel like with Aaron Rodgers, don't be shocked right now if the Jets don't look much better with Rodgers due to how good that division has gotten. You look at what the Dolphins did. They went out and traded for Jalen Ramsey. The Bills are just, I think they're still absolutely low. Granted, they lost Tremaine Edmonds to, I think, the winners of free agency, the Bears. But I mean, and you have New England, who really haven't done much. But I still think
they're still there.
They're still there, and they're literally the Jets' kryptonite because we beat everyone in that division but the Patriots. And I feel like they were the worst team out of the 3. But speaking of free agency, we'll head to the guys in blue, the boys in blue with the Giants. You guys made that big trade for a certain player that I didn't think you were going to go after at a position you kind of needed, but you've been under the radar a little bit. Colin, talk to us about what the Giants have done so far.
I think it's a little bit of a sneaky offseason for the Giants. Obviously the big stories that we talked about last show was Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley staying for next year. But, the Giants were quiet for a bit. I didn't think that Joe Shane was really going to make a lot of big-time moves. But, of course, I think we have to talk about it first. The massive trade for Darren Waller. A huge tight end, one of the best tight ends in the league. But his main problem has been the past couple of years that he hasn't been able to stay healthy. Now, he's only played about 8 or 9 games the past couple of years. But even then, he still is on pace to have 1,000-yard receiving seasons. In 2022, he had 388 yards, and in 2021, he had 665 yards. But like I said, a lot of these seasons were kind of hampered by injuries. So you figure it was kind of what the Giants are banking on here. If you can get him healthy for a 17-game season, he can go back to being that 1,000-yard receiver. And obviously, as I've stressed so many times, this is what we desperately need. You need a pass catcher who can really be a threat, who can kind of take the pressure off of Saquon Barkley, take the pressure off of Daniel Jones. And, as we've seen in the modern NFL, having a great pass catching tight end is so vital. I mean, we even saw the 2 Super Bowl teams this year. We saw Travis Kelce for the Eagles. We saw Dallas Goedert Travis Kelce for the Chiefs. Sorry, Dallas Goedert for the Eagles, both having huge impacts. And the tight end's just a crucial part of football now. So having Darren Waller is huge. And, I'm hoping that we can see a lot of improvements there and I think this is a great fit for Daniel Jones as well, because we haven't really seen Daniel Jones prove himself a lot in the deep passing game. He's been very good, short, intermediate throws. So getting Darren Waller kind of as a safety valve, I'm sure that's going to get a lot of yards after the catch in a lot of different scenarios. Going to be a great fit for that offense. So we're going to see a kind of a 2-headed monster with Darren Waller and Daniel Bellinger, who also, had a pretty solid season last year for a rookie tight end. So I'm excited to see where that goes, but there are even more moves to talk about for the Giants. Now, first off, we finally addressed the linebacker. Bobby Okereke came to the Giants from the Colts.
I thought we were going to get him, to be honest.
Yeah,
I kind of wanted him.
But, he had pretty good production for the Colts. I'm excited to see us finally get a linebacker, because that was a position that for a couple of years, ever since, Blake Martinez stopped producing for us, we haven't really been able to get a lot of production at our linebacker spot. Kind of really the sore spot of the team last year, because teams ran all over the Giants last year. Now, we didn't really give up a lot of points per game, but we had one of the worst run defenses in the NFL. It's a big reason why Philadelphia in that divisional round game was able to run all over us. So, again, a middle linebacker to kind of stop that, it's something we desperately needed. Now, in terms of the wide receiving room, they also made more moves there as well. We ended up signing Paris Campbell also from the Colts. He's not a guy who's had a lot of production recently, but people like his upside. Maybe we can see something happen there. They also re-signed Sterling Shepard and Darius Slayton. Now, Shepard, he's a guy who I'm kind of, past thinking that he's going to be able to produce at a high level, but obviously he's a great locker room guy, being there for all those years. He's been there since 2016, kind of the veteran of that team. So obviously for a locker room presence, you want him back there. Darius Slayton was one I did not expect, because I think he was our leading receiver last year in terms of our wide receiver room, but he still is kind of inconsistent. You still see a lot of drop balls from him. But it seemed like a guy who, kind of put his head down, didn't complain about originally when the year started, he was kind of put lower on the depth chart. He ended up kind of coming into his own, being a producer for this team. So I'm just hoping that most of these moves are for depth, because I'm still hoping that we still draft a receiver in the first round. Now, I also saw there's news we signed Jamison Crowder today to add more depth, but it has to come to a point where you need to actually get a guy who you think can be a number 1 receiver, because, who really is it on this team? At this current state, I think that you have 3 main receivers and maybe Paris Campbell, Isaiah Hodgins, and Wan'Dale Robinson, but I think you still need a number 1 guy. I said the Giants are kind of talking to Jackson Smith and Jiva. Hopefully that can happen. Now, we might need to trade up for that to happen, but sure. It just depends on how aggressive Joe Shane wants to be for a receiver. I think it's the main part of the team you got to focus on. Now, in terms of who we lost, our only main subtraction was Julian Love, which does hurt to a little bit to a degree, because he really wasn't, he kind of came into his own last year, becoming kind of a leader on the back end of that defense. But we ended up signing Bobby McCain from Washington to kind of fill that void. What do you have to say about the moves your Giants have made?
Well, absolutely. They're not high risk moves, really. Darren Waller didn't really cost all that much.
Only a 3rd round pick.
Exactly. So this is not something that, if it doesn't pan out, then it doesn't pan out, and it's going to suck, because he's probably going to have a big role next season. But of course, it's not, in terms of cost, it's not a move that you're probably going to regret come a few months from now.
The logic is would you really find a guy of that level in the 3rd round if you drafted one? I know people like Michael Mayer out of Notre Dame, but they weren't going to draft him 1st round. But yeah, like you said.
Now, there are plenty of opportunities for the Giants to do more, but yeah, as you mentioned, they got to get that impact wide receiver. I don't know if this team is ready to make that big sacrifice yet. Of a bunch of first round picks for the future or whatever to a team for a big wide receiver. But as you mentioned, they could trade up, right, and look at this year's draft or possibility of a trade. But yeah, I think they really got to make that impactful move. But if they don't, it's still nice that they're keeping us excited for next season by making these smaller moves.
Big name on the market is still DeAndre Hopkins.
Right,
Still yet to
yep.
be seen if the Giants go for that. I mean, he's getting up there in age, but I mean,
Yes.
what do you think about possibly that?
I mean, I'm not sure. What do you think the cost exactly would be?
Third.
Really?
They want a third for him. Second or third for him.
I don't think that's that unreasonable.
I don't think it's that bad. I mean,
it just depends on how much that factors into your cap situation. But I mean,
And
I
you
would
figure, like,
take
what-
that on to
I
get a
think you
number
also-
one receiver.
I think what you got to really think about more with that is, as you mentioned, he's getting up there in age. How's he gonna impact the team now? Because you got to give up like a couple second round, third round picks for the future. I mean, for a position that you really could use, I don't think it's that bad.
Because I think the kind of philosophy is, if you made the division around a year ago, you want to do better. You want to get to higher points. I don't think you're going to be like, well, we'll just retool. I think that you kind of want to go all in if you had that season, right? I mean,
Exactly. Now, again, I don't know if they're ready to do that, right? That bunch of first round picks, right? And you don't see many trades like that in general, but I think they got to make that big trade, as you mentioned, to really make that go that step further, because the other teams in this division are not really going anywhere. They're still going to be there, and you still have to play this whole season over again. You're not going to have that 7-0 start or whatever the Giants started off as last season and coming in next year. Now you got to do it over again. So, yeah.
Yep, Dallas and Philadelphia aren't going away, but I think we kind of have to move into more general moves that happened so far in free agency. I mean, what are the moves that you were looking at, Robbie?
I mean, I got two big ones here. I wish one of these guys went to the Jets because it was both needs. My two favorite moves of the offseason so far has been Jesse Bates to the Falcons and Tremaine Edmonds to the Bears, who are both trying to do something in order to make their teams relevant. Now, I want to address, I don't think we went over this, but the first pick was traded by the Bears to the Panthers, and then the Panthers have gone out and actually signed some good players as well. I'll dive into that in a second. But the Bears, they want to make a splash move. They got Tremaine Edmonds day one for 4 years, around $92 million. I think that's decent value for the guy. I think he's a big impact player. He's very young. He was drafted as a very young player a couple years ago. The Bills traded up for him when he got drafted. He was a great player for the Bills. I think he's going to be a spark plug that Chicago needs to start a rebuild with that defense next season. And then you look at Jesse Bates, safety originally from the Bengals. He goes out now to the Falcons. I think that's the weirdest move of the offseason so far, because I don't know why he went from a contender to 7-10 at best is what Atlanta is, I think, right now. I mean, Jesse Bates signing on the dotted line for around $16 million a year. Do you think they overpaid for him?
Tough to say. I mean,
he got like Jamal Adams. He got like Jamal Adams money.
Well, yeah. I mean, but it just depends on what Atlanta thinks he can do next year.
I think I think it's kind of what they needed, and they needed a big impact guy on defense, because I think they should have gone after the defensive line. I said that 2 weeks ago. They need that defensive line help. I thought defensive line would be addressed. They're last in sacks by a country mile in QB pressures. And then they went out and really didn't do much else. They got Taylor Heineke for $7 million a year. I don't think that's that bad. I mean, they needed someone to play quarterback. I think Taylor Heineke starts week 1 for the Falcons next year. I'm dead serious. I think he starts over Ritter. I think he's much better than Desmond Ritter. Maybe not. Maybe actually no. I'll rephrase that. Maybe not week 1. I'll say week 4, latest. But other than moves that I want to go over real quick, what are your thoughts on wide receivers that have been kind of decent, like I'll say kind of mid to decent, getting $11 million a year? Jacoby Myers and Juju each getting $11 million a year. I think that's a problem because both of them I don't think are worth $11 million. I thought they'd be worth about the 7.5 range. But Colin, what are your thoughts on what's happened so far?
Maybe this is kind of a situation like the quarterbacks where the market is just only going to get higher. These players are going to get paid more money. But I feel like wide receiver, you can get a lot of options in the draft. I don't feel like it's really necessary to play a mid-tier guy like that over $10 million, because we see the draft produce a lot of great wide receivers every year. But, obviously those teams are very wide receiver needed. We saw Juju Smith-Schuster go to the Patriots. We also saw those other teams, but the Jets playing for Allen Lazard, which I feel was just a move kind of to appease Aaron Rodgers. But we'll see what happens. But Other moves I was looking at, I also want to kind of highlight how Orlando Brown's going to Cincinnati because they stole him from Kansas City, and now Kansas City responded by getting Jawan Taylor. Definitely a move that's big, but of course, this happened just a day after our last show. We didn't get to address it on here yet. The Panthers trained again for the number 1 overall pick from the Chicago Bears.
Briefly, but
yeah, so obviously, DJ Moore getting sent to Chicago, Panthers getting the number 1 overall pick. Obviously, that's such a huge move because we kind of felt that Chicago was going to do this, acquire more assets. As you said, Chicago were big spenders, hoping to improve this team, build around Justin Fields. It seems like Carolina may take CJ Stroud, at least from what the reports are indicating.
Yeah, they are.
So it doesn't look like Bryce Young's going to go there. Maybe that means Bryce Young goes to Houston. But speaking of Houston, they also made some pretty good moves as well, too. They got Jimmy Ward. They ended up also, I believe it was, who else was it? I believe there's 2 other big players they got.
It was a tight end. I think it was Dolan Schultz.
Yeah, Dolan Schultz from the Cowboys. Yeah, another underrated piece. So also Robert Woods, they also signed as well. Starting to piece together that team back. Obviously, if you have a young quarterback, you need to support him, and Houston's doing that so far. Chris.
I mean, I was going to point out teams. I see the Patriots, right? Of course, the Juju Smith-Schuster signing. Mike Gesicki, I was going to bring him up as well. I even look at the team, honestly, might go a little under the radar. A team like the Commanders, maybe, right? Signing Jacoby Brissett, like Nick Gates, right? Guy in the Giants.
I think Jacoby Brissett's their starter. He's one of the most underrated quarterbacks. I mean,
what would you give him on a scale of 1 to 10 of how he did last season with the Browns?
Well, I mean, considering the circumstances,
right.
I mean,
he blew a giant lead with his team really blew a giant lead.
I mean, considering the circumstances, I mean, he has to be like over a 5. Definitely, it has to be in a more positive range.
I give him a 6. I give it a 6.
Yeah, like 6. Yeah,
I mean, he's like kind of mid, but I do agree with I don't know what they're doing at quarterback. They have Sam Howell. They have Jacoby Brissett.
Oh, speaking about what they're doing at quarterback, we didn't get to talk about this. The Las Vegas Raiders and Jimmy Garoppolo.
Oh,
now.
Yes.
I don't know what the Raiders are doing there because I think Derek Carr is still to be the better quarterback. I don't see why you replace Derek Carr with Jimmy Garoppolo.
Shiver.
I mean, yes, but I don't really see the motivation behind it. I mean, I think I get Jimmy Garoppolo if you put him into a winning situation. He's a good quarterback. We saw it in San Francisco, but I just don't think that Raiders are really an ideal fit there because of how tough that division is. I mean, I think Garoppolo can, make them respectable. Garoppolo's still going to play solid, but kind of weird to see that move. Chris, what were you going on with before?
No, I pretty much covered it. I was talking about I was actually going to also bring up Garoppolo. I thought it happened by the last time we had the podcast. I thought we talked about, but I was confusing it with the Saints getting Derek Carr. But I mean, I don't really understand. I mean, I'm sure the money. I'm pretty sure Carr's getting paid less or more, right? Just a little bit more.
I think it's $18 million in difference.
I mean, it's a lot of money, but still, I mean,
apparently in reports, Carr got something extra that we can't address on stream. So, you guys, everyone, look it up. Just look up what Derek Carr is going to be getting in Vegas because we can't say it on stream.
Right, but I don't really understand that, but because of course, quarterback's the most important position. You got to make sure you have your best guy, and replacing a guy who was there for a while, your franchise quarterback, with someone who's barely been able to start for the 49ers is that's difficult. Yeah, so that's all I got.
I mean, I still like Garoppolo. I think if you put him into a win now team, they can do that. But I'm not really sure the Raiders are win now. I mean, we saw 2 years ago they had a pretty good season. Coming back from a bad record, having that playoff game against the Bengals where they ended up losing. But they had a tough year last year, and I just don't think that putting Garoppolo in there is going to really make them what they want to be. But that's kind of the big moves that we've seen so far.
Actually, a fun fact. I remember back in October, I was going after Justin Fields. I didn't realize that DJ Moore, and I believe he's 26, will be, if he has the yards he has again, would be the all-time leading receiver for the Bears by a lot, by about 400 yards. That's a problem. I think that speaks more about the Bears. I mean, DJ Moore, I didn't really get to talk about him much. I love DJ Moore. I think he was going to get traded eventually. But the Panthers responded by signing Adam Thielen and Miles Sanders. What are they doing? I mean, I'll not going after the NFC South, because I know we do have some NFC people who like the NFC South that watch our streams. I'll say this lightly. That division is atrocious. Both South divisions suck.
Another move, Baker Mayfield to the
Bucs. Oh yeah, Baker Mayfield to the Bucs. I haven't even been able to address that yet. I don't know what they're doing either. I don't think anyone knows what they're doing, to be honest. But I think we'll move on. We talked about this last stream. We have about 15 minutes left. I think it's only fair, before we go to our question of the week, to talk about the World Baseball Classic and how it ended. First of all, I'm going to speak on the ending first. What a way to end it. It felt like a story.
Absolutely.
I mean, I think if Trout hit a home run, people would have said it was scripted.
I think already you got people saying it's scripted.
Because
I mean, of course, it seems like I think everyone enjoyed that final at bat.
that was fun. The whole tournament culminating with that, perfect way to finish it.
Right, and of course, not taking into account what a certain person on ESPN had to say the other day.
Oh my God. Who was that? Was that Chris
Russo?
Russo?
His name's Christopher Mad Dog Russo.
Oh
Listen,
my God.
He's a guy who I have a ton of respect for. Right? He's been doing it for a while. He knows the business, but and this is who he is, right? You could talk about why does ESPN hire these guys. This is who he is. He's the funny
like what
New
the
York,
hell? Like what? Why would you say
the
that?
funny old guy with the New York accent.
That's so ridiculous.
I don't understand that at all, though. I don't understand. You can make a hot take, right? You could say, you can make some crazy hot take, whatever. You can, by all means, go ahead. But when you say that,
Sounded senseless.
That wasn't even a hot take. That's just saying that wasn't a good at bat, which I don't see.
Like Mike Trout strikes out a lot,
Right.
Not really.
Like I can understand, right? I mentioned this too when it happened, right? Like, yeah, it's got to be up there with the one at bat that I brought up was when Barry Bonds faced Eric Gagne.
Yes,
because he was one of the best hitters ever, the best closer in baseball, and it was not only phenomenal at bat, heated rivalry, Dodgers Giants, but they were also both juiced up. So just like,
yes, sir.
That was crazy. That's one of the best at bats ever. But this is up there. I mean, I don't understand why. It's just such a stupid take from Chris Russo. But again, you still got to respect him. He's not been in the business for a while. As much as it may disappoint us trying to get there to where he is, that he can make takes like that, and it really makes our dream seem like a reality.
Yeah.
Even though it's gonna be the future. We'll see what the future holds for us. But that's other than that, I mean, if this is just a terrific tournament. I mean, baseball is a sport that of course, my favorite sport, but it tends to get a lot wrong when it comes to advertising the game and the athletes. And they finally, I don't think we've ever talked about not the unwritten rules. That's another issue, but the new rules. I don't think we even talked about that on the show. I'm sure we'll touch on it during the season. And Rob Manfred actually mentioned that we're going to get some revisions to that. Thank God. I was really on the fence with the pitch clock, not totally against it, but really had some issues with it. But I this is a sport that has gotten a lot wrong, and they finally did something absolutely right. I think everyone can agree on that. This was a tremendous tournament. It was so entertaining. So many great stories. I mean, really, if it wasn't for March Madness, this would be the number one talked about sporting event going on. I mean, this was incredible. It was from beginning to end. I mean, all right, like
I think the one incident that's going to get looked at the most is pitcher injuries, and the way I've been very critical of what happened, why Edwin Diaz got injured. You guys have heard it more off camera. I understand looking back at it more. In the moment, as a fan, not really knowing what it's like, the rivalry of Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, why the heck were they celebrating? I still don't get it. I know the rivalry is great. They finished in second. Venezuela owned both of them.
I don't know what you don't get. This is a pool victory. The winner of this game won the pool.
But you didn't see
got to advance to
Venezuela didn't celebrate like that against either of them.
Because they were 4-0.
And then they went out.
This was a winner-take-all game.
I think Venezuela, first of all, I got to watch them play Nicaragua. I think, by the way, that Nicaraguan dude.
Yeah, that's a great story.
That's a phenomenal story. I love that.
Getting to sign with the Tigers.
Sign with the Tigers?
I mean,
And I want to talk about stories because I don't want to get in another major debate. I think that one of my favorite stories, and I'm not going to call this team disappointing, even though they went 1-3. The Czech Republic won a game.
I mean, that was
those got like 3 claps for me for that. Czech Republic won a game. A team of amateurs who do like some of, I think, the coolest jobs I've ever heard of out of amateur players. I thought they were gonna be like San Marino in soccer and just get killed every game.
I mean,
they went out and won a game. Now, granted, China was horrible.
Korea too.
It was China.
China.
Now, granted, China, they're horrible, but they won a game. What is your favorite story of the whole tournament, Chris?
That's got to be number one. But I mean, let's mention my pick, Mexico, to be a
That was
surprising
great.
pick.
I'll give it.
I
That was a
mean,
great
listen.
pick.
All right, I'll talk about them. Right, they first of all win the pool with the USA, Canada, Great Britain, and Colombia. Not the easiest, not the hardest pool to win. Right. Yeah. Apart from the US, you beat the US, that you're almost guaranteed to win that pool. Okay. Then they beat Puerto Rico, who I wasn't as high on as other teams. Right. I thought Dominican Republic was going to easily advance, and I don't think that's a hot take. I think they were clearly the better team, and they just again, and as you mentioned, you didn't like that Edwin Diaz was celebrating. You know, not everyone in this country can understand what it's like to play for their own country. I feel like there's many people from this country who do root for the United States, and then some who don't really. It's not that there's anything wrong with not rooting for your country, right? If you don't feel, if that's not important to you, you think more, I'd rather root for my New York team or my Boston team if I'm from there, if I'm a fan of those teams, right? But these people in other countries, people from Puerto Rico, or even though Puerto Rico is obviously a territory of the United States, people from Puerto Rico, people from the DR, people from Venezuela, this is everything to them. And these players, in many cases, this is more important to them than winning the World Series.
Yeah,
this is their World Series. This means that, I mean, these guys, what people don't talk about enough is these guys from the DR or Venezuela come from poverty. They come from nothing. They make baseball gloves out of cardboard and have to play with not even real baseballs. And they go all the way to be sometimes better than some of the American players, and the American players have all this equipment, all this advanced technology, and go to great colleges with scholarships and all that. It's really fascinating. So that's why this tournament meant so much, and you see the atmospheres and the crowds. But Mexico is a country that is so dominant, such a dominant soccer country. Even though they don't tend to do so well in the World Cup, people there love that sport. And I feel like baseball is a sport that I've been saying it for a while, since I've first become a baseball fan, that Mexico is a true baseball giant when it comes to looking at it from the world perspective. And you got to see that they did not overachieve. That team was better than Puerto Rico heading into that game.
Yeah.
I mean, now the way they won that game may imply that they were the underdog and had to come back, but going into that game, I mean, Urias versus Stroman, that was the favorable matchup for Mexico, and they ended up having to come back because Urias wasn't great. And then they take Japan to the ninth inning, take a 3-0 lead against Japan, and blow it. But it doesn't matter. Was the best team in the tournament. I mean, I think Mexico really inspired a lot of people. Hopefully, that country can understand just how important that sport is over there, how prominent it is, even though some people may not understand it. And I hope that this is just going to grow the game even more. This tournament, I absolutely loved it, and Mexico is definitely my underdog, not underdog, but my team to watch from this tournament.
It was fun to watch Trey Turner mash a lot of home runs for USA. But I think my biggest story that I want to talk about is just how much, like Chris said, to screw the game of baseball. We saw how crazy the viewership numbers were in Japan. I mean, these Japanese fans really do love this team, and they're really invested. I mean, I know we don't really talk about it as much on here, but so Shohei Ohtani's Instagram followers went up by 3 million over the course of this tournament.
Incredible.
I mean, the way this is growing the game, making these players more popular, I mean, it's really phenomenal for the sport, because baseball has had this problem, right? They had problem marketing, they had problem getting new viewers to the game, but it seems like they're getting a lot of fans internationally, and that's always great, because that's what a lot of sports try to do. We see the NFL, trying to get these games in London. They're trying to get more fans from across, all over the world. We see even the NBA try to dabble into that, but Major League Baseball seems like they're starting to kind of do that, get a solid base there.
An example is Connor McDavid, star hockey player from the Edmonton Oilers, the other day was talking about it. I was asked in an interview what he thought about it, and he thinks that hockey needs to implement something, because hockey is also a sport that's very entertaining but doesn't do a great job advertising. I know few. I don't know that much about hockey, apart from the New York Rangers and a few of the stars out there. So if hockey implemented like a World Cup type tournament,
they do have a World Cup,
right? But I think that's the Olympics, right?
No, they have a World Cup, and they call it the World Cup of hockey. Just no one watches it.
Right,
I think it's a lot of amateur players now.
Yeah. I think that's it's a lot of younger players. I think when you have these stars playing for their own country, that's definitely gonna be great for that sport. But and I think before we end it here, I just want to talk more about that Edwin Diaz thing. We don't have to have a debate on it.
No.
But even though I think it's good to always have debates on sports radio and sports talk shows.
If you want, I don't.
But because again, it's just I'm saying and I understand where you're coming from, and we don't have to have this debate because if
Yeah.
you don't want to.
I think at the end of the day, I think we'll both agree that I think looking back at it once again, I'm actually going to contradict what I said earlier. It's I am really going to contradict myself
It's
here.
fine, I
It's
mean-
going to it's a heat of the moment. Let's go with that.
I don't.
That's the best way I can put it without making it sound negative.
Well,
like,
I'll say
he-
this, right? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
First of all, players can get hurt doing anything.
That's
You can get hurt.
very
You can
true.
get hurt in season. You can get hurt over the off season.
You can do something totally
So
stupid, like
stupid.
Yoenis Cespedes and
Yeah,
get hurt on a
yeah.
ranch.
I remember it was Blake Snell or something dropped some statue that he had in his bathroom on his foot. And
I
he was
do
out
remember
for a
that,
month,
yeah.
something like that. I think it was Sammy Sosa went on the injured list from a sneeze or something
Someone-
like that. Something stupid, or it was like a cough. something
Someone got
like
hurt,
that.
like
it's like
someone got hurt riding a
some
bike. I
stupid
think.
things, so stupid. Madison Bumgarner on the
Yeah.
motorcycle injury. It's just like some injuries are crazy stupid. You can't. I don't understand these idiots saying that the World Baseball Classic is to blame.
No, I
wanna-
agree with that part.
Right, yeah, and if people want it, look, I'm on board with moving it over. Right, if you want to move it to after the season, I'm open to that because
I mean-
you figure, all right, Edwin Diaz gets hurt, he's going to be
Yeah.
out for 8 months. Let's say you had it in November, which I understand, players are going to be off.
I
for a
think
month and
people
then
would play
coming back.
less. I think less players would play in the World
But
Baseball
then you
Classic in
figure like the
November.
best of the best are probably mostly in the postseason, and then the ones that aren't are the ones that are on board. Because we saw a lot of
Yeah.
guys who don't make the postseason be in this tournament. So maybe like a Max Scherzer or Garrett Cole, maybe being being ready
Maybe.
after playing in the playoffs.
Maybe.
Playing in November isn't going to be a big deal for them, and you figure Edwin Diaz gets hurt for 8 months, then he could come back by July, after 8 months if it's in
That's
November.
the only positive I would see from him.
And another thing is the Mets allowed him to play in this World
That's
Baseball
true.
Classic.
That is true, and that's a great point.
So
It's a phenomenal
Steve
point.
Cohen could have said, hey, Edwin, you're so big for this team. We need you. And I'm sure he understood that. He knows that Edwin Diaz is huge for his team, but he understands that him playing for Puerto Rico means a lot more to him than some people can understand.
Yeah, you're
So,
100% right about that.
So I can understand what you're saying, that the Mets and their season is much more important than this in general, right? They're the ones giving him his money, but to him, this means the world to him, I'm sure. And being able to celebrate with his guys on the field was special. It was just an awful moment, but Puerto Rico got to play for him the next game. Unfortunately, lose, but still played for him. And overall, I think apart from that, this whole thing, but again, the injuries can happen anywhere. Apart from that, this tournament was stellar, and I give it a 10 out of 10 on everywhere.
I
mean,
agree with
great.
the 10 out of 10 rating. One story I don't think gets talked about enough. What about Team Cuba? Granted, Team Cuba, I ruled them out, and I shouldn't have. They went out. Now, granted, that pool, I didn't get to watch much of it because it was in Taiwan.
Yeah, and they were in 6 a.m.
And it was like, I think those games started at 11 o'clock at night and like 4 a.m. Everyone went 2-2. I think Cuba and
Italy. And that's another team.
someone else, I forgot who
Italy.
was Italy. Made it out of the group. And then Cuba went on and won a game in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Very impressive showing. Team Yoenis Cespedes went out and won a game in the playoffs. I think that is one of the more overlooked stories.
Oh, yeah.
Is the Caribbean nation of Cuba doing something after being disappointing in the previous edition. Granted, it was 6 years ago, but they were able to get the job done, make some noise. Team to look out for in the future. That Chinese Taipei team was very interesting.
Right.
They went out and won 2 games as well.
I actually want to talk and real quickly before we end. First of all, Italy not making it to the World Cup was very disappointing. So I felt a sense of pride being Italian for the first time in a while since the Euro win a few years ago in soccer. But being able to advance, Matt Harvey's possibly, can he make a little MLB comeback?
That was freaking crazy.
Italy
2
winning.
great starts from Matt Harvey.
Italy advancing, that was awesome. Unfortunately, I don't talk about them because I didn't get to watch their games. But Cuba, what's so interesting about that, and I'm glad you brought it up, is that's a country that has faced so much government,
they go through a lot of
they had to face communism for a long time, and it's so I mean, you got an example, I forget his name, but it was a guy on the Cuban national team who left the Cuban national team after they had lost the game to the US and got to stay in the United States because these players have to defect from Cuba to these other countries because it's so difficult for them to leave. They have to talk to the president for her. It's all a political thing, but those people have been through a lot over the years. And so it's so awesome that now they can finally get players from 8 major league teams getting to play. Because the whole thing is these players, like if they at all, I think the thing is if they at all criticize the Cuban government, then they can't play for the Cuban national team. Stupid things,
That's ridiculous.
silly things like that. So hopefully now, they can finally be able to play. It's a whole political spectrum they can go down talking about this, but it's nice that Major League American players finally can play for Cuba, and they're going to be a team to watch out for in the future as well.
Colin, any last notes before we sign off from today?
Well, yeah, just, I saw they're going to bring WBC back in 2026. They're trying to capitalize on the popularity. So, excited to see what happens next. And, hopefully USA can win it next time. But as, you were saying, that's pretty much does it for our show today. Thank you all for watching. We'll be back next week to kind of preview MLB Opening Day, as we will be doing it on MLB Opening Day. So excited to talk about the season and all those games coming up. Thank you all for watching with Robbie and Chris. I'm Colin, and we're signing off. Thank you for watching.